What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today we're going to be discussing the brand new Beetrooper Archetype, which is a TCG-exclusive archetype set to be released in the next core set, which we're actually getting here in a couple of weeks, Dawn of Majesty. This is actually a fairly interesting archetype, so I wanted to go ahead and give you guys an overview. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So kicking things off, we have the first one here, Beetrooper Scout Buggy. This was actually the first card that got previewed because it's a card that's going to come as the promo for the premiere event. So if you go to the little sneak peek, you should be getting a copy of this. It's a level 3 insect wind effect monster, 1000 attack, 300 defense. Effect reads, you cannot special summon monsters except insects. If this card is normal or special summon, you can special summon one Beetrooper Scout Buggy from your hand, deck, or graveyard. You can only use this effect of Buggy once per turn. I just want to say, if this didn't have the restriction that it locked you into insects, this would be one of the craziest cards ever for any sort of 3-axis sort of deck. There's already so many good level 3 cards that are just able to special summon themselves or other monsters to the field. So having that restriction obviously balances this, but by itself, that already seems like a pretty good start to an archetype. Let's go ahead and see what else we've got. Next up, it looks like we have Beetrooper Scale Bomber. It's a level 3 fire insect effect monster, 1200 attack, 2000 defense, so that's pretty sizable. If an insect monster or monsters is normal or special summoned to your field except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. So in a very simple play pattern, if you go normal this, special one of these, then you can special summon a Scale Bomber from your hand as well. So that seems pretty good. When a monster your opponent controls activates its effect, quick effect, you can tribute one insect monster, destroy it. You can only use each effect of Bomber once per turn. So the one thing I don't like about this, I like that it removes the monster from the field. So this is almost a sort of like Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit sort of effect. But the problem is it's not negating the effect of the monster and it's just destroying it. So that can be good or bad depending on what you're actually trying to go for here. It does actually give you a way to interact on the opponent's turn by removing one of their cards from the field, and that could be good because it could stop a potential link play, synchro play, Xyz play, you know, so on, so on. And so I like it, but I also don't like it because the effect going through matters a lot. Effect negation is so good in Yu-Gi-Oh! So I'm a bit iffy about this one. At the very least, it's another level 3 insect that you can play in tandem with Buggy, just give you more level 3s to work with if you're going into any Xyz plays or things like that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But overall, it's a pretty decent card. Continuing on along though, we have our next monster, Beetrooper Sting Lancer. It's a level 7 wind insect effect monster, 2400 attack, 1800 defense. During the main phase as a quick effect, you can target an insect monster in your graveyard and one monster in your opponent's graveyard, special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, place the targeted monsters on the bottoms of the deck. So the fact that this is a way to have a sort of DD Crow-esque effect in the form of a level 7 monster is actually pretty good. It does require you to already have monsters in the grave, which is a bit of a downside, so you can't exactly use this on turn 0 unless you've already like hand trapped your opponent, say with like an Ash Blossom or something, and then let's say they're using some sort of effect to revive something from the grave. If you did already use that hand trap, you can actually use the Sting Lancer to be able to shuffle that target back into their deck, or put it on the bottom of their deck rather, and get this onto the field. That seems pretty cool. I mean, it's a very conditional sort of effect, but in any other instance other than like turn 1 specifically when you're going second, this is a cool way to be able to get this card out onto the field. If this card is normal or special summon, you can add one Beetrooper spell or trap from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Beetrooper Sting Lancer once per turn. So what's nice about this is that this actually triggers the effect. So if you are going second, then you can actually get a spell or trap to your hand. We'll see what those are in a little bit here. So it's also generating you advantage at the same time. Then if you are going second, this card acts as an extender as well, because again, as long as you have a monster in the graveyard, this is a free level 7 that you can special summon to the field. 2400 attack isn't like the biggest, but it's pretty sizable, right? I think it's a pretty interesting design, and I actually really like it. It generates you advantage. It can interrupt the opponent. I believe that does it for the main deck monsters. Next, we're going to go into the extra deck. So first up, we have Beetrooper Armor Horn. It's a Link to Earth insect effect monster, 1000 attack, and its arrows point top and bottom. It requires 2 insects, so it doesn't have to be Beetrooper specifically, so that's pretty good. You cannot special summon monsters except insects. You can only use each of the following effects of Armor Horn once per turn. During your main phase, you can immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon one insect monster. So what's cool is that very basically you can go Beetrooper Scout Buggy into Buggy, Link into the Armor Horn, and now as long as you have any other insect in your hand, now you get another card to be able to extend onto the field, maybe go into a Link 3 play, anything like that. So this is a very nice effect to be on a Link 2. If this card is in your graveyard, you can banish 3 other insect monsters from your graveyard, special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. build. So this is, again, another good resource for link climbing if you have a bunch of insects in the grave. You possibly already have 2 if you're going with the scout buggies. So then this can bring itself back, possibly help you extend even further. Or if your board gets wiped, you can start your next turn by banishing insects to bring this back. That it gives you 2 normal summons for your insects and allows you to sort of start rebuilding and reswarming the field. Definitely feels like an insect deck, right? So I like it. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but it actually does a lot for the deck. And then moving on along, we have our next link monster, Giant Beetrooper Invincible Atlas. I just love the flavor behind this card. So it's a link 4 Earth Insect Effect monster, 3,000 attack, and its arrows are Appaloosa's arrows. So you get 1 in the top here and then 3 arrows pointing down, so that's nice. It gives you a lot of zones. It requires 2 or more insect monsters, which is good. I mean, obviously it's insect, but again, it doesn't lock you specifically into Beetrooper, which is nice. While this link summon card has 3,000 or less attack, your opponent cannot target it with card effects. Also, it cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So it starts at 3,000, so that already seems pretty good that it has that sort of protection. Dragoon has protection like this. Let's see if this has a Dragoon sort of effect. You cannot special summon monsters except insects. That seems to be pretty standard. You can tribute 1 insect monster, then activate 1 of these effects. Either special summon a Beetrooper monster from your deck, that seems pretty good, or this card gains 2,000 attack until the end of this turn. You can only use the effect of Giant Beetrooper Invincible Atlas once per turn. So what's nice about this is that the 2,000 attack gain is only until the end of the turn. So during your opponent's turn, it's actually going to have the protection from targeting and destruction. So you can get in for 5,000 points of damage if the opportunity presents itself for you to hit your opponent directly. But then if you don't finish them off, it goes back into this sort of protective state where it's actually very difficult to deal with. So your opponent has to interact with it on their turn or have non-targeting, non-destructive removal in order to out it. And then let's not forget about the first effect, right? Special summoning a Beetrooper monster from your deck. If you haven't already gone into your scout buggy, you can then bring out a scout buggy, which can then bring out another scout buggy on top of it because it triggers on special summon. Like, the swarming capabilities here are really cool. And I really just like the design of this card. This just feels very flavorful for an insect archetype. It isn't like a card that's going to interact on your opponent's turn all that much, like, you know, compared to something like Dragoon, right? But it is cool because at the very least, you can possibly get some other cards out. There are some other cards that are insect focused that you could make later on, and we'll talk about that in a moment. It's a pretty neat card. I really like it. And then we move on to the spell card, Beetrooper Formation. It's a field spell, as a matter of fact. It says you can target a Beetrooper monster in your graveyard, special summon it, but it cannot attack this turn. Also, you lose life points equal to its original attack. What's crazy is that this actually reminds me a lot of Spiral Resort. Remember, Spiral Resort allowed you to add a spiral monster from deck to hand every single turn. You can do this every single turn, reviving a monster from your graveyard. So while it does have to be in the grave, so it's not as accessible as something like Resort, that's still a very powerful effect. And not to mention, that means we can get something like Scout Buggy, which can then summon another Scout Buggy. So we already have a link 2 play worth of material. We can bring back an Armor Horn, which then gives us 2 normal summons. We can bring back the Giant Atlas too, right? I mean, it doesn't say it has to be a non-link monster or anything. It just has to be a Beetrooper monster specifically. The only downside is it can't attack, but it's just only for the turn that it's summoned. And as long as you're getting the ability to do something with the card, then I think that's going to be really nice. I guess it would probably be more, you know, conducive to just summon another armor or what is it? The Invincible Atlas, like by using the other insects. But if you just want to summon this and stick it to the field and like play defense, you can do that too. And then the second effect, if a face-up insect monster or monsters you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon a Beetrooper token, which is an Earth Insect level 3, 1,000 attack and defense token. You can only use each effect of Beetrooper Formation once per turn. So what's nice about this is that this gives you fodder to tribute for the Invincible Atlas, because otherwise you're having to tribute other monsters in order to do that. This also gives you fodder for the Scale Bomber, because you also need material for this as well. And I think you're going to always be wanting to use the tokens for this because you don't really want to tribute off any of these other monsters that you're summoning. If you can get this virtual advantage off of the tokens and then you're just sacking those away every single time, that's definitely the ideal situation. And that way you're continuing to build your board presence at the same time. I think the field spell is exceptional. Again, you do need a little bit of setup in grave to be able to actually take full advantage of it. But honestly, I think that's fine. And the fact that this is going to represent a constantly recurring threat, your opponent is going to have to answer it to some degree. And we've seen how good Spiral Resort has been in the past. The makings of this archetype just seem very strong to me. And then wrapping up the video, it looks like we're moving on to our counter trap here, as a matter of fact, Beetrooper Fly and Sting. So it says when your opponent activates a monster effect while you control a Beetrooper monster, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. So it only specifically goes after monster effects, but honestly, Salamangreat Roar sees tons of play in Salamangreat, so that's probably going to be good enough. Now, during your end phase, phase, if this card is in your graveyard and you control an insect monster with 3,000 or more attack, you can banish an insect from your grave, set this card. You can only use one Beetrooper Flying Sting effect per turn and only once that turn. That's perfectly fine, right? If you're going to set it during your turn, you're most likely not going to use the activated effect during your opponent's turn, so that's fine. And so the fact that this can also recur itself as well, I think is crazy, and you only need a monster with 3,000 or more attack. So it is actually very similar to Salamangreat Roar in a lot of ways, just with its own special conditions to match the archetype. But again, we know how good of a card Salamangreat Roar is, and helps just make Salamangreat a pretty formidable deck. So I wouldn't be surprised if like this is just like another go-to option. And speaking of go-to options, I wanted to just quickly show off a couple of other just support cards that may actually be relevant for this archetype, one of which is Seraphim Papillon. So it's a Link 3 insect, and it says gains 200 attack for each counter on it. You can only use one of the effects once per turn and only once that turn. If this card is Link summoned, place a counter on this card for each insect used as its Link material. And quick effect, you can remove a counter from this card, special summon a level 4 lower insect monster from your graveyard in defense position. So this allows you to sort of Link climb in a way. It is a bit restrictive, but it could potentially be something that these insect focused decks use since you are locked into insects. And then there's also number 3 Cicada King. This is a card that really has never seen play, but for insects, it's actually pretty decent. So it requires any 2 level 3s, and as we know, there's a lot of level 3s in this deck. If the battle position of this card is changed, you can special summon one insect monster from your hand or graveyard in defense position. When a monster on the field activates its effect, you can detach a material, then target that monster, negate its effects, then make one insect monster on the field either gain 500 defense or change its battle position. You can only use each effect once per turn, and what's nice about this is that you can use both effects on itself, right? You can detach to negate an effect, you can change the battle position of the Cicada King, and then you can special summon an insect from your hand or graveyard. That means you could go into Scout Buggy. Scout Buggy can summon another Scout Buggy during your opponent's turn, so you start to build the swarming process all over again, right? And so it's fascinating to see how this archetype is looking to other insect cards that really hasn't been utilized before in any sort of competitive fashion, right? And while looking at the archetype, although it doesn't necessarily have the greatest tier 1 potential right out of the gate, it has a lot of hope. And when you look at some of these individual cards and you think about other TCG exclusive archetypes, some of the makings of these older TCG exclusive archetypes that ended up being some of the best decks in the format, think Burning Abyss, think Cosmo, received their truly broken support in the second set upon release. So in the instance of Burning Abyss, it was the new challengers. In the instance of Cosmo, it was Dimension of Chaos. Cosmo received Cosmo Dark Destroyer, which was just absurd. And you also had, in the instance of Burning Abyss, cards like Virgil and Fire Lake. So since this is a TCG exclusive archetype, I think that the makings of this deck are here, but we don't have the big payoffs that we're really looking for to make us want to play this deck. Although there is some peripheral and ancillary support that already exists that is starting to make this deck come together. I really feel like we're just missing that 1 or 2 cards that are going to be the big payoffs to make us want to play this deck, right? When you look at actual insect support, there isn't like an insane payoff for going that route. And if anything, I think a TCG exclusive archetype would give us that. And so who knows? Maybe it'll be in the form of like a Link 5, maybe it'll be another Link 4, maybe it'll just be another monster and just really just helps the consistency of this deck run so smoothly. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I definitely think these are cards that if you're going to your sneak peek, or excuse me, your premiere anytime soon, or you're picking up Dawn of Majesty, which if you should use my affiliate links because you get 5% off. Thing is though, I think you may want to pick up some play sets of these cards because similar to like Burning Abyss and Cosmo and Spiral and some of the other TCG exclusive archetypes of the past, if this archetype does receive the broken support in the next set, which is Burst of Destiny, then you're going to definitely want to have a play set of everything. And looking at it, it doesn't seem to be the highest rarity. I think only a couple cards are like ultra rare and some of the rest are supers and commons, which is pretty easy to pick up, right? So at the very least, I think this is a potential penny stock, right? So maybe just pick up play sets of everything, just sit on them, wait for Burst of Destiny, and then if we get the broken support when that set comes out, then you are going to be ready to start swarming. So guys, that's going to do for me. Be sure to let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this brand new Beetrooper archetype. I'm pretty optimistic, and you know, sometimes when we look at these archetypes, it just seems like they're just way too limiting in what they're able to do, but this deck seems to have a lot going for it, and being a TCG exclusive archetype, Konami is also somewhat incentivized to want to make it good because it helps them sell their other sets. So be sure to let me know what you guys think down below. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon and receive exclusive one-day early access to the Yu-Gi-Oh progression series, The History of Yu-Gi-Oh, and Sealed Showdown. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.